Welcome back, as I am going to answer a few more of your questions in this segment of Behind the Scenes. This question is from City Guy USA, who asked, compare and contrast TV during the Walton era and TV now, and your thoughts. What you like, what you don't like from a consumer point and an insider. Wow, the thing with anything to do with art and television, film, books, music, is it's all very subjective. It is all subject to personal opinion. So anything that I say here is strictly my opinion and my views about it. So feel free to disagree and like what you like and don't like what you don't like and watch the things you like. One of the things that I noticed from moving forward since that point is how often I came across, both as an actor and then as a writer when I was getting notes from people about things I was writing, was how often the word edgy came into play, and it would come into play. You might have noticed it in descriptions of shows. Things became edgy. They had to be a little darker, a little more intense, and pushing boundaries and things like that. And although I liked the element of realism in some of that, I found sometimes I'm not a fan of pushing boundaries for the sake of pushing boundaries. If it's because it's an important message, great. And I mean, the Waltons always tackled various different issues of the time and storylines that weren't necessarily safe. And I like that. And I think that's important, that we are in a medium that has the opportunity to shed light on things that might not otherwise be looked at, and to bring to the awareness of people things that are going on in life and with people and stuff like that. But I feel that sometimes in the testing of these boundaries, that perhaps the pendulum for me swung too far and things became gratuitous, whether it was too much violence, too much gore, too much sex, that they stopped trusting that the audience is smart. We have imaginations. We don't need to be graphically shown everything to fill in the blanks for ourselves. So that's just, again, my opinion. So often I would steer away personally from shows that were really gritty and really dark and a little twisted and stuff like that. Just not my cup of tea. And I feel that changed from earlier eras. Perhaps sometimes earlier shows had a little bit of a rose-colored glasses look at things that wasn't particularly realistic. And I understand that sometimes I prefer things that do seem a little more realistic, but I still feel like that can be done, as in the case of the Waltons, without having to push it too far. Keep it consumer friendly for the whole family and still tell wonderful stories and still tell important stories. I also found that more and more they started creating characters. They went for flawed characters. I understand we all have flaws. We all have strengths and weaknesses, and sometimes heroes were perhaps a little too perfect, and it's hard to find overly perfect people. So I understand the wanting to show more dimension to characters. Maybe they thought it was more relatable to the audience, but sometimes I just thought I had a hard time liking the character, and I like to care for and root for the sort of the leads and the characters, and if a story is being well told, I feel like I should be on the side of the hero, however reluctant and whatever he has to overcome, or she, to be that sort of hero, that I still want to like him. And sometimes I would watch shows and my husband and I would sit there and think, I don't like any of these characters. I can't relate to any of them. I don't really want to watch them. And so we turn things off. That for me, again, got pushed a little too far. I want to root for people, and I want a story, and I want to see people that make me want to be a better person, that give me something to aspire to because they have qualities that are noble and honorable. And I think those are important things to represent in TV, and that doesn't always happen. In terms of the craft, interesting things have happened. There have been advances that really make independent work possible now, because costs have come down and equipment has become more accessible. We don't need to have all the huge lights and really expensive cameras in order to make films or TV now. So that makes it easier. But I still think it comes down to good stories, so good writing and good acting, and those are not necessarily budget related. I know so many tremendous actors that wouldn't charge a fortune to do it. They're not big names, but they're going to do dynamite work. So I feel that, and telling a good story has nothing to do with how much the writer was paid. So those basics are still there and can still be utilized. A lot of stuff today depends on a lot of bigger and better special effects at the expense of storytelling. So although I can appreciate and ooh and ah with how advanced special effects have become, I still want a good story. I still want to care beyond just the cool special effects. So strictly my opinion. I also think there's too many reality shows, and as an actor that bothers me, because we make a living doing scripted shows, not turning a camera on our life, although I'm doing that right here. So, but this is not a reality show. And I am not creating drama for your effect. This is strictly, to share. So there you go. Those are my opinions. And then Tucson McBanshee had some questions, who was asking whether I still perform. Yes, I do. And whether the strike has an effect on that. Yes, it does. Although I would still be able to do theater. I just haven't had the opportunity in the last couple of months while we've been on strike. So, and as you all know, I've modified this content so that I can continue to, share different aspects of life and my career during this time. So how it compares with performing as an actor, musical theater, things like that, whether you do all the staging, costume design yourself, or you have other people to tell you what you should do or wear. I think you're talking about theater here. Acting on stage is different than acting on camera, but the basics are the same in that you're trying to create a believable character. It's just that on stage it needs to be magnified in a way that reaches everybody in the audience. And when you're on camera, everything can be very subtle, and you can rely on your eyes and your facial expression, which can't necessarily be seen beyond the first few rows in a theater. And the continuity with a theater production, you go from beginning to end, which is nice for an actor to have that sense of building the arc of the show each night. And in film or television, because you shoot all out of order and in short little pieces, you really have to work harder to know what that arc is and where you want your character emotionally to be, and where they are within their beginning, middle, and end arc of the show. So that's a bit more work, just more homework, more notes for yourself as you get into scenes. In terms of costuming, it depends. Sometimes on stage or on TV, I've worn my own clothes. If it's something that I have the clothing for. If it's a period piece, no, don't have those those pieces. So it really depends. It depends on the budget of the show. Even with TV shows or films I've done, oftentimes I wore my own clothes. But on stage, same thing. It depends on the show and depends on the budget of the show and the period and style of the show. So sometimes it's a mix. Some of my pieces, some not. And then whether you feel that singing is more an expression of yourself than acting, where you play a character. Originally when I started singing, I did musical theater because I felt comfortable with a character. And so doing musical theater, the songs were an extension of the character. So I felt comfortable within that. But then as I got more comfortable as a singer, away from being locked within a character, I learned more about how to, each song sort of has its own character. It has its own story, particularly for the type of music I like to sing, which is more story driven. So therefore, I determine what's the story of that song. What I create the background of it. Who am I singing to? What am I trying to say? And you can change it when you're doing a standalone song. Each song, can have a different take on any given night. I could sing Over the Rainbow one time, and it could be sad and poignant about a sense of loss or something that I want that isn't there, that perhaps will be over the rainbow. Another time it's hopeful. It's to try and inspire and say, hey, life can be better. So it's more about the future and hope. So that's a wonderful thing about songs. So I can choose whatever expression of it that I want. So they're both fun. And speaking of singing, there was a couple questions here from Peace Shepherding, who's asking more specifically about technical things regarding singing. So if that doesn't interest you, feel free to sign off now, and I'll see you next time. But if you want to hear me get into a little bit of her questions on singing, then feel free to stick around. So she said, in case more questions about singing skills may be entertained, might you offer some practical tips you found helpful with which we may experiment, though informally without a teacher's feedback? Aspects to expand note range or tone or any other element. So some different things that, and she was asking about what key things made a difference for me and how I developed. And then even in high notes, she's speaking about my voice, that my speaking and singing voice is lovely. Thank you very much, and seems relaxed. Even in high notes, there's resonance rather than a baby voice. I sometimes hear in excerpts from some Broadway musical singing of late. Seems like long and elongated speaking more than singing. Maybe these relate to how one focuses on projecting from within the head, not just vocal cord and lung capacity. Okay, so I made a few notes based on those questions. For me, in all my years of studying voice, one of the key things that I found helpful was the way you shape the vowels. You have a couple of choices. You can make them long and oval, or you can make them more horizontal. A lot of people, I'll come across singers who were told to smile to hit the high notes. If you'll notice, when you smile, everything pulls up, which to me tightens everything in the vocal cords and in the neck. So I worked with teachers who always talked about keeping everything very relaxed in the vocal cords and the throat. So to create more long, oval, vertical notes than horizontal. So that was one thing. And then just vocal exercises that stretch and allow you to work on tone and on pitch. So singing scales, and all of those allow you to learn how to reshape as you change notes within a scale. The higher the pitch is, the more support it takes, the more air it takes, and the placement changes. So doing vocal exercises regularly help to, just like any physical exercise, it stretches the vocal cords and teaches them how to be flexible. And that's what you're looking for. You want that flexibility. And then you can work on the shape of them, which impacts the tone. Practicing as often as possible, daily ideally, but don't expect to sing once a month and that your voice is going to improve. For me, when I was learning to sing and trying to expand range and things like that, I would sing songs I loved, but I would often also sing songs that I loved that were a little beyond me at the time, so a little beyond my current range. I would just try to hit those notes. I don't recommend continuing to try and shout or scream notes higher within your chest voice, because it can damage the vocal cords. But I was learning songs and looking to expand my sort of soprano range. So from that standpoint, I would sing songs that had higher notes in them, and I couldn't hit the notes and stuff, but I just keep singing them. And I found that the more I sort of stretched my range, the more I could then actually hit the notes. And then I'd work on a song that had some higher notes, and then I could learn how to hit those. So that was something I did. I don't know that it works for everybody, but the main thing is to try not to be doing things that create tightness, and that if you feel pain in your throat, then I would say stop what you're doing, because you could be creating nodules on your vocal cords, blisters, calluses that could create more long-term problems. So things like that make a difference. You're looking to create space for these notes. You kind of create that space in the back of the mouth. The soft palate is lifted and you create space back there, but you focus the tone. The higher it goes, more kind of right behind the nose, but you don't want it to be nasal. Sometimes people will mistake focusing the pitch with a nasal sound, which is not what you're looking for. You can focus it without it being a nasal sound. So that would be my recommendation. I hope that some of that made sense and was helpful. And for those of you who stuck around through all that technical singing information, thank you for still being here, and thanks for watching. And I will see you next time when we either answer more questions, or hopefully soon we will be back to covering more about the Waltons. Thanks for watching.